His mistress called his black wife poor trash. Then he learned she was a trillionaire's daughter. What would you do if your spouse stayed silent while someone publicly humiliated you? This is where the story begins. He invited his wife to the gala for one reason: to prove to his mistress that she no longer mattered. Beneath 12 crystal chandeliers, Simone Bennett Cole sat at the farthest table from the stage, where the flowers were smaller, the lighting dimmer, and no camera would accidentally frame her beside Ethan. The placement was deliberate. Everything about the evening was. Cole Meridian Development was celebrating its 10th anniversary inside Manhattan's most exclusive hotel, surrounded by bankers, city officials, and investors who could decide whether Ethan's struggling company survived another quarter. Simone wore a simple emerald gown with clean lines, no visible designer label, and the small gold compass pendant her mother had given her years ago. Across the ballroom, Ethan stood beneath a wall of white roses with Vanessa Hart pressed close to his side. Vanessa wore scarlet silk and the satisfied smile of a woman who believed proximity to a powerful man made her powerful too. Simone watched Ethan's hand settle against Vanessa's back. Once, that touch had belonged to her. Now it looked rehearsed, designed for photographs and whispers. She felt no sudden heartbreak, only the quiet pressure of a truth becoming impossible to excuse. Vanessa noticed her watching and crossed the marble floor with a champagne glass lifted between two polished fingers. Conversation softened as she approached. "Mrs. Cole," Vanessa said brightly, stopping beside Simone's chair. "I almost didn't recognize you." Simone looked up without rising. Vanessa's eyes moved over the emerald fabric, the modest clutch, and Simone's bare wrists. "No diamonds tonight?" she asked. "For your husband's biggest event?" Several guests turned away, pretending not to listen. Simone rested one hand over the other. "I didn't come here to be photographed." Vanessa laughed softly. Clearly, Ethan saw them and hurried over, but concern never reached his face. His first glance went toward the Northstar Civic Capital representatives near the stage. Northstar was the private investment fund considering a refinancing package that could rescue Cole Meridian from collapse. Ethan had spent months courting them, never knowing who controlled their final vote. "Vanessa," he said under his breath. "What?" She slipped her hand through his arm. "I'm welcoming your wife." Then she looked at Simone again, her smile sharpening. "Though I have to admit, Ethan, you build luxury towers, and she shows up looking like poor trash." The words carried farther than Vanessa intended. A photographer lowered his camera. Someone near the stage stopped speaking. Simone gave Ethan one silent opportunity to defend her. His jaw tightened, but his eyes remained fixed on the investors. "Let's not make a scene," he murmured. He said it to Simone, not Vanessa. In that instant, 7 years of marriage seemed to narrow into one clean decision. Simone rose slowly, smoothed the front of her gown, and met Ethan's gaze. "For years, I protected your dignity in rooms where you had none," she said. "Tonight, you can protect it yourself." She placed her untouched champagne on the table and walked toward the exit without hurrying. Near the ballroom doors, a silver-haired Northstar executive stepped aside. He lowered his head respectfully as she passed. Ethan saw it. Then the man whispered into his phone, "Dr. Bennett is leaving. Inform the board that Northstar's founder has made her decision." The moment Simone left the ballroom, Ethan stopped thinking like a husband and started thinking like a man whose secrets were about to become expensive. The elevator doors closed on the chandeliers, the cameras, and Vanessa's satisfied smile, leaving Simone alone beneath cold white light. Her reflection in the mirrored wall looked calm enough to belong to someone else. Only her left hand betrayed her, trembling once before she tightened it around the strap of her clutch. By the time the elevator reached the underground garage, the shaking had stopped. Marcus Reed was waiting beside a black sedan with a leather folder tucked beneath one arm. He ended his call the moment he saw her. "What happened?" he asked. Simone stepped into the back seat before answering. Exactly what he intended. Marcus joined her from the opposite side and placed the folder between them. Inside was the final forensic review of Cole Meridian Development. $18.4 million in unauthorized transfers. $6.7 million in undisclosed executive compensation. Inflated occupancy reports on 3 luxury projects. Multiple breaches of lending agreements. Every page carried evidence Ethan had ignored, concealed, or signed. Simone read the first summary twice. Not because she doubted the numbers, but because the man attached to them had once sat beside her at a kitchen table and promised they would build honestly. Rain slid across the tinted windows as the car pulled away from the hotel. The compliance committee is ready to freeze the refinancing review tonight, Marcus said. Simone closed the folder. Not tonight. He looked at her carefully. He allowed Vanessa to humiliate you in front of 200 people. Humiliation is not a financial standard. No, but fraud is. Simone turned toward the city lights. For 2 years, she had warned Ethan that Cole Meridian was growing too fast, borrowing too heavily, and treating community protections like decorations for investor presentations. At first, she spoke as his wife. He called her anxious. Then she spoke as an economist. He called her disloyal. Finally, she stopped arguing and began documenting. Northstar Civic Capital quietly purchased Cole Meridian's distressed debt through independent brokers, not to punish Ethan, but to protect the contractors, pension funds, and neighborhoods that would suffer if his company collapsed. Did we acquire the final debt tranche? She asked. At 4:17 this afternoon. Control. 62% of secured obligations. Enough to block refinancing. Enough to demand an independent restructuring. Enough to remove Ethan from control if the board approved it. Simone looked down at her phone as 3 messages appeared. Where did you go? Vanessa drank too much. Don't make this bigger than it is. Then the final one arrived. Northstar saw you leave. You may have ruined my deal. He did not ask whether she was hurt. He asked whether she had harmed his financing. Simone forwarded the messages to her attorney. For the divorce file? Marcus asked. For the pattern. The sedan stopped outside a modest 3-story brick building in Brooklyn, above a bakery that employed women rebuilding their lives after incarceration. Ethan hated the place. He called it beneath them, never realizing Simone owned it through a community land trust created before their marriage. Marcus handed her the folder, then hesitated. There's one more thing. Simone waited. Augustus Bennett's office contacted Northstar again. He wants a private meeting before the infrastructure summit. Her expression hardened. Tell him he can request one like everyone else. Marcus's phone vibrated. He read the message and looked back at her. Ethan just called Northstar's emergency line. He told the board his wife is emotionally unstable and may interfere with the company. Simone looked up at the dark windows of her apartment, then at the audit carrying Ethan's signature. Good, she said softly. Now he has put the lie in writing. The first thing Ethan tried to save the next morning was not his marriage, but the story he had told about it. At 6:10 a.m., Simone stood barefoot in her Brooklyn kitchen while the bakery below filled the building with the warm scent of rising bread. Rain traced silver lines down the window. Her phone held 43 missed calls, 3 voicemails from Ethan, and a video from the gala that had already spread across social media. Vanessa's voice came through the speaker, bright and cutting. Your wife walks in looking like poor trash. The camera shook after the insult. Someone gasped. Ethan appeared at the edge of the frame, silent and calculating. The caption beneath it read, CEO's mistress humiliates black wife at charity gala. Simone turned the phone face down and poured coffee into a chipped blue mug she had owned since graduate school. Ethan had tried to replace it many times with expensive porcelain sets no one was allowed to use. The doorbell rang. On the security screen, Ethan stood beneath the awning in last night's tuxedo, his bow tie hanging loose and his hair damp from the rain. He looked less like a remorseful husband than a man whose company had opened badly. Simone pressed the intercom. This is not a good time. We need to talk. My attorney will contact you. His face moved closer to the camera. Vanessa made a stupid comment. She had too much champagne. You permitted it. I was trying to avoid a public spectacle. You were trying to protect your financing. The silence that followed told her she had struck the truth. Ethan glanced toward the empty street. Northstar postponed our meeting this morning. Did you speak to someone? No, it was technically true. She had not spoken to someone from Northstar. She was Northstar. Then how did you know? You announced the deal to half the ballroom. His expression tightened. For years, Simone had answered every question he asked, explained every number he ignored, and warned him before every mistake. He had mistaken access for weakness. Let me upstairs, he said. We can fix this before it gets ugly. It became ugly when you brought your mistress to a company gala and allowed her to degrade your wife. We have been separated for 4 months. Because you said you needed space to save Cole Meridian. And you agreed. I agreed to distance, not deception. He lowered his voice. Whatever you think happened, do not contact North Star. They are the only reason this company may survive. Simone looked at him through the screen for several seconds. Your company's only chance was honesty. She ended the call. At 7, Marcus arrived with outside counsel, a forensic accountant, and 2 sealed boxes of records. They gathered around Simone's old dining table while morning light moved across spreadsheets and legal filings. No one mentioned the video. Work was cleaner than sympathy. By 9:30, the path was clear. North Star would issue a formal notice of covenant breach. Vendor payments would be protected. Executive bonuses would be frozen. An independent restructuring officer would be proposed. Simone's divorce petition would remain separate from the financial review. No revenge clauses. No demand for Ethan's premarital shares. Only disclosure, dissolution, and the return of intellectual property he had registered under Cole Meridian without her consent. Her attorney slid a declaration across the table. It concerned the Harbor East model, the financing structure Simone had designed 8 years earlier to rebuild neglected neighborhoods without displacing residents. Ethan had used versions of it in 6 projects and claimed corporate ownership. Simone signed the declaration. At 10:12, the bakery downstairs went quiet. A line of black vehicles stopped along the curb. Marcus looked through the window, but Simone already knew who had arrived. Only one man she knew traveled with enough security to darken an entire block. The doorbell rang again. On the monitor stood Augustus Bennett, silver-haired, severe, and impossible to mistake for anyone ordinary. Behind him, a woman carried a leather case stamped with the crest of Bennett Global Holdings, the trillion-dollar empire Ethan had spent years trying to reach. Augustus looked directly into the camera. "Simone," he said, "your husband requested a meeting with me this morning." Her hand tightened around the signed declaration. Then her father added, "He offered me your work." The cruelest theft was not that Ethan used Simone's work, but that he had spent years teaching the world to believe she had never created anything at all. Augustus Bennett entered the apartment with the controlled silence of a man accustomed to owning every room before he spoke. His silver hair was immaculate, his charcoal overcoat untouched by the rain, and behind him walked Evelyn Shaw, Bennett Global's chief legal officer, carrying a black leather case stamped with the crest Ethan had spent years trying to impress. Simone remained beside the dining table. She did not offer coffee. She did not ask why her father had come. "Show me," she said. Evelyn opened the case and placed a presentation deck beneath the morning light. On the cover, Cole Meridian's logo appeared beside the words "The Bennett Urban Renewal Platform." Simone turned the first page, then the second. Her Harbor East model was there in polished diagrams, stripped of her name and dressed in Ethan's branding. Community, ownership percentages, anti-displacement protections, municipal bond layers, every structure she had built before their marriage appeared as if it had been born inside his company. He requested $2 billion in emergency capital, Augustus said. In exchange, Bennett Global would receive exclusive international rights to this platform. Simone's fingers rested on the edge of the paper. When did he make the offer? Yesterday afternoon. Before the gala. Before Vanessa called her poor trash. Before Ethan blamed Simone for threatening his deal. He had already decided her work was his to sell. The room blurred for one brief second, and memory moved through her with the smell of rain and old coffee. She had met Ethan 8 years earlier outside a planning hearing in Baltimore. He wore an inexpensive navy suit and carried a proposal that would have displaced 900 families. Simone dismantled it in 12 minutes. He found her on the courthouse steps afterward. "You destroyed my financing plan," he said. "It would have destroyed a neighborhood," she answered. Instead of resenting her, he laughed. For 6 months, they rebuilt the project together. They worked after midnight in his small apartment, covering the walls with maps and calculations. Ethan brought takeout. Simone created the equity model. When the city approved the revised plan, he kissed her beneath a broken parking garage light and promised they would build things that lasted. For a while, they did. Then success arrived. Investors learned Ethan's name. Magazines photographed him in unfinished towers. Each year, Simone's role became smaller in his story. First, she was his partner, then his advisor, then his wife who preferred to stay out of business. Eventually, he introduced her as someone who helped with community events. She had watched herself disappear one interview at a time. Augustus closed the presentation deck. "Come back to Bennett Global," he said. "Take your rightful position. I can end Cole Meridian before lunch." Simone looked at him. The offer sounded like protection, but she recognized the old condition beneath it. Return to his empire. Accept his name as the source of her power. Let one controlling man replace another. No, Augustus's expression tightened. "He stole from you. I have evidence. He disgraced you publicly. I have a divorce attorney. He called my office this morning and described you as unstable." Simone felt something cold settle into place, but her voice remained even. "Then he has repeated the lie to another witness." Augustus stepped closer. "You are my daughter. That did not always protect me from you." The sentence changed the air. Evelyn lowered her eyes. Marcus remained silent near the window. For the first time, Augustus looked less like the head of a trillion-dollar empire and more like a father confronted by the cost of his certainty. Simone pushed Ethan's presentation back across the table. "You may provide a sworn statement that he tried to sell work he did not own. Nothing more. You need resources." "I have resources." Augustus's gaze moved toward the compliance files, the North Star reports, and Marcus standing beside them with no trace of surprise. Understanding entered his face slowly. "North Star," he said. Simone met his eyes. "I built it." Her father went still. North Star Civic Capital controlled billions in infrastructure investments and had outbid Bennett Global twice in the past year. Its founder had remained anonymous by design. Augustus looked at the woman he had once assumed would eventually return to inherit his empire. "How much of Cole Meridian's debt do you control?" he asked. "Enough." His phone vibrated. He checked the screen. "Ethan is waiting in my boardroom. He believes I am considering his proposal." Simone closed the stolen presentation and handed it to Evelyn. "Let him believe it until Thursday." Augustus studied her. "What happens Thursday?" Simone lifted North Star's formal restructuring notice from the table. "That is when Ethan meets the investor he thinks can save him." The woman Ethan had dismissed as decorative had spent years building the only institution capable of deciding whether his empire lived or died. North Star Civic Capital occupied 4 floors of a restored warehouse along the East River, without marble statues, family portraits, or a single gold letter bearing Simone's name. The entrance held only a brass compass set into polished concrete, a quiet echo of the pendant at her throat. She arrived before 7 the next morning, when the offices still smelled of cedar, fresh coffee, and cold steel. In that hour, numbers had not yet been dressed in optimism, and no one mistook confidence for truth. Simone paused before a wall of completed projects. A public hospital in Detroit, a solar grid in New Mexico, a flood barrier protecting 3 Louisiana parishes, and a housing cooperative in Oakland where residents owned the land beneath their homes. None of the photographs featured her. That had always been intentional. She wanted the work to matter more than the woman funding it. Marcus entered with 2 paper cups and a thick approval packet. "The independent committee voted on Cole Meridian," he said. Simone accepted neither the coffee nor the packet until she asked, "Vendor protections?" "Funded for 90 days. Construction peril? Guaranteed. Pension exposure? Ring-fenced from executive claims." Only then did she take the coffee. North Star's restructuring plan would preserve active projects, protect small contractors, and prevent hundreds of employees from paying for Ethan's decisions. It would also suspend his control pending a full review. Simone had not spent years rebuilding herself only to confuse justice with destruction. The people who poured concrete, processed invoices, and cleaned unfinished towers had not humiliated her beneath chandeliers. The vote was unanimous, Marcus said. 1 abstention, no objections. Simone looked through the glass wall at the gray river. "Prepare the notice for tomorrow." Her phone vibrated on the conference table. Ethan had sent another message. "I made mistakes. Please come home so we can handle this together." Simone read it once. There was no apology for Vanessa, no admission of theft, no acknowledgement that he had called her unstable. He did not miss his wife. He needed access to the woman he believed could still be persuaded to protect him. She placed the phone face down. By noon, Cole Meridian's board received formal notice of covenant breaches. 2. Directors demanded an emergency meeting. The company's general counsel resigned after learning financial records had been concealed from him. Vanessa posted a public statement claiming her gala remarks had been misunderstood and that Simone had arrived unexpectedly to provoke a private dispute. Marcus slid the statement across the table. Do we respond? Simone returned it. No. She wants a second stage. Silence denied Vanessa the performance she needed. At 3, the director of the upcoming Bennett Infrastructure Summit arrived to review security and the speaking order. The event would announce Northstar's $12 billion investment initiative before governors, pension trustees, global executives, and national media. For the first time, Northstar's controlling founder would appear publicly. Simone had protected her identity for more than a decade, so her work could be judged without the Bennett name. But privacy had begun protecting the wrong people. Ethan had used her silence to erase her. Vanessa had used it to measure her worth by address. The event director studied the schedule. Mr. Bennett will give the opening address, then introduce Northstar's founder. No, Simone said. Marcus will introduce me. She would not enter as Augustus Bennett's daughter. She would enter as the woman who built Northstar. That evening, she returned to Brooklyn and found a bowl of soup outside her door with a note from Mrs. Alvarez downstairs. For strength, not because you look weak. Simone smiled faintly and carried it inside. At 9, someone knocked. Vanessa stood in the hallway without makeup, her confidence stripped down to fear. He told me you were nobody, she said. Simone kept the chain fastened. Why are you here? Vanessa glanced toward the stairs. Ethan is clearing the private archive. Financial records, contracts, everything. Simone's expression sharpened. Why tell me? Vanessa swallowed. Because he told the board the unauthorized transfers were mine. Simone reached for her phone. Send me every message, every calendar entry, and every document you have. Vanessa stared at her. Are you helping me? Simone dialed Marcus. No, I am preserving the truth. Then she looked past Vanessa toward the dark stairwell. Tomorrow, Ethan would walk into the Bennett Center expecting salvation from a faceless investor. Instead, for the first time, he would hear the name Simone had spent years refusing to use. The truth was ready to step into the light, but Simone understood that power revealed too early could still be mistaken for spectacle. By sunrise, the preservation notices had reached every Cole Meridian server, and the company's private archive was legally protected from deletion. Vanessa's messages confirmed dates, approval codes, and meetings Ethan had tried to bury beneath polished reports. None of it made Vanessa innocent, and Simone did not pretend otherwise. Cruelty at the gala remained cruelty. Cooperation did not erase it. It only gave the truth another witness. At 10 that morning, Simone sat across from her divorce attorney in a quiet conference room overlooking Lower Manhattan. The petition was filed electronically under the name Simone Bennett Cole. The grounds were simple, irretrievable breakdown. No public accusations. No dramatic references to adultery. No attempt to turn humiliation into theater. Separate claims addressed the intellectual property Ethan had registered under Cole Meridian without her permission. Simone requested no spousal support and no access to his premarital holdings. She asked only for disclosure, proper compensation, and the return of what had always been hers. When the confirmation appeared on the attorney's screen, she removed Cole from her professional records. One click ended the public attachment to a man who had spent years erasing her from his success. At 4, a garment bag arrived at Northstar from Lila Monroe, Simone's college roommate and now the founder of a respected Harlem fashion house. Inside was an ivory suit with a long, architectural coat, elegant enough for the Bennett Center without borrowing the language of a crown. A handwritten note was pinned near the collar. You never needed to look powerful. Tomorrow, let them catch up. Simone dressed before dawn the next morning. She fastened her mother's small gold compass at her throat and studied herself in the mirror. No diamonds. No family crest. No symbol that belonged to Ethan or Augustus. Only the pendant Celeste Bennett had given her before she died. Her mother had once told her that North was not where powerful people instructed you to go. It was the direction you recognized when the noise finally stopped. Across Manhattan, Ethan paced inside a private reception room at the Bennett Center. Credit lines had been suspended. 3 board members had threatened resignation. Reporters waited outside the building. Vanessa sat 20 feet away with separate counsel, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Ethan had spent the morning insisting the Northstar delay was temporary and that Augustus Bennett would announce an emergency partnership with Cole Meridian. No one had promised him that. Desperation had simply completed the sentence for him. Simone entered through a service corridor with Marcus and outside counsel. Caterers pushed silver carts past her. Technicians checked microphones. Custodians polished fingerprints from glass doors. Simone greeted each person she passed. The people who prepared powerful rooms had always interested her more than those who entered expecting applause. Near the stage, Augustus waited alone. His eyes paused at the compass pendant. "Your mother wore that the day she left her first firm," he said. "She was afraid." "She went anyway," Simone answered. He held out a revised copy of his opening remarks. "Your identity is not mine to reveal." Simone looked at him carefully. It was the first boundary he had accepted without negotiation. "Thank you. Would you prefer that I introduce you?" "No. Marcus will." She would not appear before the world as an heiress being welcomed by her father. She would appear as Northstar's founder. The auditorium filled with governors, pension trustees, investors, and journalists. Ethan sat in the front row, checking the program again and again. Northstar's speaker was listed only as S. Bennett, controlling trustee. His gaze paused on the surname before he dismissed it. Bennett was common enough. His wife had once told him her father owned a manufacturing company, and Ethan had never cared enough to ask what kind. Backstage, Marcus approached Simone as Augustus concluded his address. Applause rolled through the hall. "Ready?" he asked. Simone listened to the moderator announce that Northstar's founder had chosen to remain anonymous for more than a decade. "No," she said softly, stepping toward the curtain. "But I am done hiding." Marcus walked to the podium and looked directly toward the front row. Ethan leaned forward as the lights shifted. Then Marcus spoke the name that would rearrange everything Ethan believed he knew. "Please welcome the founder and controlling trustee of Northstar Civic Capital, Dr. Simone Bennett." The room did not fall silent when Simone appeared. It rose, and Ethan was the only man too stunned to stand. She stepped through the curtain beneath a wash of white stage light, wearing the ivory suit Lila had made for her and the small gold compass pendant that had belonged to her mother. For one suspended second, no one moved. Then Marcus began applauding. Northstar executives followed. Pension trustees stood. Governors, city leaders, contractors, and community representatives rose one row at a time until nearly 2,000 people were on their feet. Ethan remained seated in the front row, his program slipping from his hand. On the page, the name S. Bennett had looked ordinary. On stage, it rearranged his entire understanding of the woman he had married. Simone walked to the podium without looking at him. That wounded him more than anger could have. For 7 years, even in disappointment, her attention had belonged to him. Now her gaze moved across the audience with calm precision, stopping on workers, city planners, and local leaders whose names rarely appeared in business magazines. "Cities remember what we value," she began. Her voice carried evenly through the auditorium. "They remember which neighborhoods receive hospitals and which receive promises. They remember who is invited to own the future and who is asked to disappear for it." Behind her, the screen changed to images of Northstar projects across the country. Affordable housing in Oakland, a public hospital in Detroit, flood protection in Louisiana, and a clean energy network serving rural New Mexico. Then the Harbor East model appeared. Ethan recognized the framework immediately, but this version carried the original date and the credit he had removed. Designed by Dr. Simone Bennett, 2016. His face tightened. Simone announced Northstar's $12 billion infrastructure initiative, with community ownership, transparent lending, and permanent anti-displacement protections built into every project. She did not mention the gala. She did not repeat Vanessa's insult. The contrast was enough. The woman called poor trash was standing before the most influential financial leaders in the room, directing more capital than Ethan had ever imagined controlling. When the governance panel began, Simone took her seat beside Marcus and 2 public pension trustees. Augustus sat at the most devastating consequence was not that Ethan lost the room, but that Simone refused to turn his collapse into entertainment. By late afternoon, the summit had resumed under a revised schedule, while Cole Meridian's attorneys met privately with investigators to secure the company's servers and financial records. No arrest had been announced, and Simone would not allow rumor to outrun evidence. Justice, she understood, was not the same as spectacle. It required documents, witnesses, dates, and decisions that could survive long after the cameras moved on. Across the country, Clips of the morning spread quickly. One showed Simone stepping onto the stage as North Star's founder. Another captured Augustus Bennett identifying her as his only daughter. Headlines called her the hidden heiress to a trillion-dollar empire, but they missed the detail that mattered most. North Star had not been built with her father's operating fortune. Simone had begun with $12 million left by her mother and grown it into a $48 billion institution through years of disciplined investment. The Bennett name explained where she came from. It did not explain what she had built. North Star released a brief statement confirming the distinction, outlining its restructuring plan and promising protection for workers, pension funds, contractors, and community partners. The statement never mentioned Vanessa's insult. Simone did not need to repeat the words, "poor trash," to prove they had been false. At 6 that evening, she entered a quiet conference room where Ethan waited with 2 attorneys. His tuxedo was gone, replaced by a gray suit that fit him poorly. The divorce petition lay on the table between them. For the first time since the gala, no investors, reporters, or board members were watching. "You filed before the summit," Ethan said. "Yes." "So today was not designed to punish me." "No." The answer seemed to unsettle him more than anger would have. He opened the settlement proposal. Simone requested no spousal support and no claim on his premarital shares. Her North Star interests remained separate property under the agreement Ethan had signed years earlier without reading the attached schedules. She asked only for fair compensation for her stolen intellectual property, full financial disclosure, and dissolution of the marriage. "You could have told me who your father was," Ethan said. "I told you I came from significant wealth. You never said Bennett Global. You never asked. You had already decided my family could not matter as much as yours." He looked down at the page. "Why live in that apartment? Why dress like you had nothing?" Simone studied him quietly. Even now, he measured value by what could be displayed. "I had what I chose," she said. "That is different from having nothing." Ethan rubbed his wedding ring. Vanessa meant nothing. A final sadness moved through Simone, soft and brief. "She meant enough for you to let her degrade me in public." I panicked. "You calculated." He leaned forward. "I was trying to save thousands of jobs. North Star saved those jobs this morning. You were trying to save your position." Silence settled over the table. Beyond the glass wall, staff cleared abandoned programs from the summit hall. Ethan looked older beneath the fluorescent lights. "Did you ever love me?" he asked. "Yes," Simone said. "I loved the man who sat beside me in a small apartment and wanted to build neighborhoods without erasing the people who lived there." She paused. "But I cannot remain married to the memory of him." His attorney placed a pen beside the settlement. Ethan signed each page slowly. When he reached the final line, his hand trembled. "Will your father destroy me?" he asked. "My father is not the law." "Will you?" "I submitted evidence. What happens next belongs to the process." He signed his name. Simone rose, gathered nothing, and walked toward the door. "Simone," he said. She stopped. "I am sorry." There was no audience, and for that reason she believed he meant it. But remorse could not reverse years of deliberate choices. "I hope one day you understand exactly what you are apologizing for," she said. Outside the conference room, Augustus waited alone. He asked whether she would join him for dinner. Simone declined, but not forever. Before entering the elevator, she handed him the Stolen Harbor East presentation. "Return every page to outside counsel," she said. "And then," he asked. The doors began to close. "Then learn the difference between giving your daughter power and respecting the power she built without you." Augustus lowered his gaze to the Bennett Global crest on the folder. For the first time, Simone saw him remove the gold company pin from his lapel, as though even a trillion-dollar name had finally learned when to step aside. The day the divorce became final, Simone did not feel as though she had lost a husband. She felt as though she had finally stopped carrying a man who had mistaken her silence for dependence. 6 months after the gala, spring light filled the North Star offices above the East River, turning the glass walls pale gold as Simone joined the virtual court hearing from a private conference room. Ethan appeared from his attorney's office in a plain navy suit, quieter than she remembered him. The judge reviewed the settlement, confirmed that both parties understood the terms, and dissolved 7 years of marriage in less than 15 minutes. When the screen went dark, Simone remained seated for a moment, listening to the soft hum of the building. Then she opened the final document bearing the name Simone Bennett Cole and removed Cole from every professional record. What remained was Dr. Simone Celeste Bennett, the name she had carried before Ethan, the name her mother had spoken with pride, and the name Vanessa had never bothered to learn before calling her poor trash. Outside the conference room, North Star employees were preparing for the groundbreaking of a public health and affordable housing complex in Baltimore, 4 blocks from the courthouse steps where Simone had first met Ethan. The project used the original Harbor East model, now publicly credited to its rightful author. Cole Meridian had survived under new leadership, but Ethan no longer controlled it. The investigation found deliberate financial misreporting and attempted destruction of records. He accepted responsibility through a negotiated plea, surrendered his executive authority, and funded restitution through the sale of his shares. The workers kept their jobs. Small contractors were paid. Neighborhood protections remained in place. Simone had not destroyed the company. She had removed the deception from its foundation. Vanessa resigned and cooperated with investigators. Months later, a handwritten letter arrived at Simone's Brooklyn apartment. Vanessa did not ask for forgiveness. She wrote only that she had called Simone poor because she had built her entire worth around being chosen by a wealthy man. Simone folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. She understood the confession, but she no longer needed to carry its weight. At the Baltimore ceremony, children painted ceramic tiles for the new building's entrance while nurses, teachers, construction workers, and longtime residents gathered beneath a white canopy. Simone wore a navy suit, low heels, and the gold compass pendant her mother had given her. Augustus sat in the 3rd row without a speaking role. For most of his life, he had entered every room as its center. That afternoon, he watched his daughter without stepping into her light. After the ceremony, he approached and told her Bennett Global had accepted North Star's terms for a national clean water initiative. No controlling stake. No special treatment. Community ownership remained non-negotiable. Your mother wanted me to build this way, he said. But you did not, Simone replied. Augustus nodded. No, it was the first time she heard him admit failure without defending it. Nearby, a little girl held up a bright yellow tile and asked where it should go. Simone knelt beside her. Somewhere everyone can see it, she said. Together, they pressed it into the wall near the entrance. As applause rose behind them, Simone looked through the unfinished steel frame toward the city beyond. Once, Ethan had believed her modest apartment, simple clothes, and quiet work proved she had nothing. Vanessa had repeated that judgment beneath 12 chandeliers. But the truth had never been that Simone was secretly valuable because she was a trillionaire's daughter. The truth was that even without her father's empire, her husband's name, or anyone's permission, she had built power of her own. When someone called for Dr. Bennett, she stood and walked toward the sunlight, leaving the past behind her like a room whose doors no longer needed to be locked.